Welcome to the story of the rise and fall of my first service company, Stowe Mechanical, and what I learned, what I took away from it. Guys, this is my first podcast. I'm very excited. Hey guys, I'm just here at the airport. Look, make sure you like and subscribe to the video by clicking right here before we continue, and enjoy the podcast. And this is going to become a regular thing. So we're right here in my office filming today. A couple doors down is our training facility. I'm going to be coming at you guys with some videos, a learning management system, and some other things that are going to be really exciting soon. But for now, I want to share with you guys the story of the rise and fall of my first service business, what not to do, things I did right, and areas that we don't tread again. Give you a little bit of background for those of you who don't know. My first business, I started at the age of 23 years old. All right, I started with my grandfather doing HVAC at the age of 12. And prior to starting my business, I worked for the state of Oregon in the military installations department, where I was an energy engineer. Now, before that, I worked at a company called P&L Johnson Mechanical. And in P&L Johnson Mechanical, I was the department manager for the service department and eventually an operations manager as well. The previous year to me starting the company, just to set a stage here, my life was going really, really great. We had just had another kid, me and my wife at the time. I was just named Journeyman of the Year by the, in Oregon, it's called the Bureau of Labor and Industries. That's BOLI. And I was highlighted as the HVAC Student of the Year in the college that I had attended, the trade school, Northwest College of Construction. So really good highlights to my career. My job was going well. I got recruited by the state. I started working for them. I became the youngest energy engineer in the state of Oregon, which at the time I just thought was amazing because I was 23 years old. I was making $125,000, $130,000 a year, and I had a double pension because I was also moonlighting as a Air National Guardsman at Camp Rylea as I transitioned into the Guard, a part-time service. I had always wanted to own my own service business. And in fact, I thought that one day I would buy out my former boss at P&L Johnson. I'd buy out the company there and start running that company. But wasn't in my cards because his son became involved in the company, and you guys know how that goes. I was the second fiddle, and going to the state was a good move for me at that time. Also, I was young enough to where I didn't know how to navigate that. Do I believe now that I would have had a chance with that company? Perhaps. Could have stuck with it, but at 22, 23 years old, it's really hard to tell, especially when so many good things are going your way. You kind of start feeling invincible. So I thought, well, eventually I'll start my own home service business. After some time with the state of Oregon, I started saving up some money with the Guard and with the state, and then I decided to take a stab at it. I guess they call that the entrepreneurial seizure. Now, when I decided to go into business myself, the first thing I did was I communicated with my wife. And to my surprise, I found out that the idea of going into business was not very popular. She knew that we had the security of the state, and by having two young children, it was very scary for her. So we talked about it for a little while, and after I got her on board, I began looking at the steps. For me, starting my first business, I hadn't read any books. I hadn't really studied business. I never studied accounting. I never did my own accounting. I always hired people. I didn't know much about money because all the years prior, I gave my money to my wife. She paid the bills. I went and I worked. From the age of 12 until now, I was a workhorse, but I wasn't a businessman. And we'll get to that later. But I went ahead and I looked at Google and I typed in, what was it? I put in how to start an HVAC business or a mechanical business, how to become a mechanical contractor in the state of Washington. That's what I put in. And Washington L&I has a website that gives you like step-by-step information. First, you have to get a corporation, you have to get a bond, you have to do this, this, and this, and then you can come in and get your license and start practicing mechanical work. You had to have a 06A or equivalent. You had to have a electrical administrator and some other small things. And so all I had to do was take the administrator's test. I did that and was able to go in and get my mechanical contractor's license in the state of Washington. So that was maybe about $300 of work, maybe less. I also found an old Chevy Express van. It was a 2007, if I remember correctly, 2006, 2007 Chevy Express. And I think it was listed for like $6,000. I got the van. I drove it home. I wasn't going to do this as a chuck in a truck. Now, for all you HVAC owners out there who have a legitimate HVAC business, a brick and mortar with employees and everything else, you know what I'm talking about when I say chuck in a truck, right? It's that guy who leaves from his home. And maybe we all started out that way. I didn't want to start out that way, though. In fact, I was afraid of it because I'd worked for such nice, well put together companies. And we always talked about the chuck in a truck. So I went and I got a small building on the main road in Long Beach, Washington. And that building was $800 a month.
Didn't know how I was going to pay for it.
I think I had total of like $8,000 saved up. And at this point, I was kind of burnt right through all of that money. And that's before we had a single job, so no cushion. But I got that van and I drove it home. And then the next day I went into my office and I started taking wood that I had in my garage and building countertops and desks because I couldn't afford to go and buy them. I also took chairs from our house to use as office chairs. So the office was completely just put together in a redneck style. It was thrown together very quickly, and I sat and I waited. I put a sign out. I hand painted the sign on a piece of board. Called the company Stowe Mechanical, which is just my last name and mechanical. For those of you who don't know. And I sat outside my building, and I waited and I waited and I waited, and nobody called because I forgot an important piece, which is marketing. And I thought that putting a number on a big sign outside of your building would be enough, and it wasn't. So about 3 days went by, and I'm about ready to throw in the towel there. I had made a agreement with my former boss that if things didn't work out in a week or two or a month or two, that they would let me come back to the state. So I was going to go to my wife, say, you were right, I'm going to throw in the towel, go back to the state. And about that time, I'm sitting in the office, and a man walks in the door. I have no idea who it is. I say, hey, can I help you? He said, yeah, looks like you're a new business, and I just wanted to come and say hello. Turns out it was the mayor of Long Beach. Now, this guy, his name was Jerry, and he came in to tell me that I would be getting a ribbon cutting and a write-up in the newspaper. He also asked me how business was going, and I told him it was pretty poor. In fact, I had one customer, which was a maintenance from a lady who knew me, who was a family friend, and who through our church group knew that I was starting the business. She hired me to change her filters. I think I made like $60 or $70. I didn't even want to charge her because she was a church family member. He came in the building. He said we'd do a ribbon cutting and a write-up, and the next day the newspaper was there to interview me, and we got that write-up. Now, guys, this is the first lesson that I learned, is that you got to market your business. After that write-up, I think we received maybe about 10 calls, which was just enough to pay the bills and keep the building for another month. So I thought to myself, okay, I've got another month here. What can I do? Lesson 2, the quickest way to grow your HVAC business. I didn't know it at the time, what I was doing, but I was just doing things. Okay? I've learned since then that this is probably one of the most effective things you can do in business, especially if you're growing or starting your first HVAC company, or any HVAC company, really, especially if you're limited by capital. And that's to find people who are going out of business, old guys who are ready to throw in the towel themselves. You offer them a percentage, or maybe exchange for whatever it is. You can make any kind of deal with them and get their customer base and get some equipment. I found an older guy, his name was Noel Morley. He worked on commercial fishing vessels, transport refrigeration, and he did some residential around Long Beach, Washington. He was getting older and going out of business. His protege, his name was Stoney Miller, And Stoney Miller had started going out on his own as well, and so he had some customers. I started talking to Noel, and I got connected with Stoney. We went out and made an agreement that he would come and join me at Stowe Mechanical. We would try to re-advertise to his customers. And then I made an agreement with Noel that I would start taking over the commercial refrigeration on the fishing boats and the supermarkets. And so we started walking. We got in our van and we parked in the middle of Long Beach, and we walked door to door to door to all the commercial establishments. Didn't know any other way to get the word out. But we started walking door to door to door and just introducing ourselves, saying we're taking over for Noel, giving them our number. That next week, we had a full schedule. That's not all glamour, right? We were doing well, but you can't keep up at that level for so long because it takes time to go door to door to door. So now that we have a full schedule the next week, we didn't have time to go door to door to door to get the next week of jobs. And eventually we run out of buildings. So we had to figure out another way. The other way that we figured out was after the newspaper story, the newspaper lady came into my office and she said, "Why don't you guys do newspaper ads?" Things like that. Again, by happenstance, this lady walked into the office. By happenstance, Jerry walked into the office. By happenstance, I started talking to Noel and got connected with Stoney. None of this was by design, and I had no idea what I was doing. It just kind of fell in my lap. So I kind of got lucky in a real big way. She came in and she said, we'll design it for you and we'll put it out. And for the first 3 months, we're not going to charge you anything since you're a new business in Long Beach and we want to welcome you to the community. And so they did that. And I started getting all the older customers. And what's great about that is Long Beach is a retirement community and the newspaper is still very central to the community. So we started getting a lot of customers in Surfside, Ocean Park. These are regions where the homeowners had a little bit more money to spend. Long Beach isn't poor by any means. We got connected with some Russian builders who were building a bunch of houses in Surfside at the time. So we gave them a good deal because we didn't know how to price things and we didn't know about pitfalls of RNC or how to change our strategy. We just knew we needed money. So we started taking the RNC work from them. I think we were heating a house for around $6,000 to $8,000 and putting in ductwork. So how we did that, I don't know to this day. We probably lost a lot of money, but we started doing that. And in the meantime, people would see us out there in our van, working and starting to call us. And so it just kind of organically picked up, right? The first year, I started to get celebrated by the community. We ended up in everybody's home, every business, pretty much anybody who was anybody in Long Beach. If they needed any service, they would call us. In fact, we snuffed out all the competition who was coming over from Oregon to service the peninsula. And the peninsula is not large, but we ended up capturing probably about 95% of the residential work there and the commercial work. We ended up hiring 10 to 15 people in the field and running installs every single day. Gensco started sending reps out to us twice a week. Thermal Supply, United Refrigeration, we were larger customers of theirs. That year, I think I'm pretty sure Gensco alone, we spent somewhere around $600,000, $700,000 with that distributor. We did it without any credit. We didn't have any credit lines. I remember that, but we just ran. We ran and we did what needed to be done, and we just did it fast. We did it for a good price. We didn't really make a lot of money, but I do remember looking at my W-2 at the end of the year and seeing that me and my family had made about $500,000, and Stoney, his family, made about $300,000. And I thought, well, this is a nice life. We're doing good. We need to push the accelerator. So going into the next year, I got a much larger building in the middle of Long Beach. And I was told by everybody at the time, this is going to be a horrible idea. Don't do that. Don't get the big building, because if you get the big building right in Long Beach, that building should be a restaurant. That building should be a grocery store. That building could be anything else. And the last thing that we as a community want is for it to be a mechanical shop, because it was right on the strip where all the tourists were. They didn't want an HVAC contractor being there. So they gave us ideas. They said, why don't you go to the industrial area? And I said to myself, no, I don't think so, because if I go into the industrial area, nobody's going to see us. So we went and got this big building right in the center of town, and I put my logo on it. It was probably about 25 feet long. When we put that logo on it, everybody started calling us. By the end of that year, we had done $5 million in revenue. I was flying high. We were going on trips, me and my family, to Disneyland, to other places. We were having good vacations. Things were great. And then I kind of got burnt out. When you work at a level in your business without systems, without processes, you enter a place where you are the system and the process. And it's like being Stretch Armstrong trying to hold the world together when it's broken apart and flying through space. That's a difficult place to be in, because you never have any time to decompress, because if you take your hand off of this piece, it floats away. You lose it. If you take your hand off of this piece, it floats away and you lose it. Okay? So what I ended up in was a position to where if I focused on anything else, my business would suffer. And unfortunately, because I was focusing on my business so much, my personal life, I lost it, right? So I couldn't focus on my wife, couldn't focus on my children. And that's hard to say, but that's just business. And it'll do it to you. It'll do it to anybody who runs into this situation. I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. This is why so many business owners become divorced. Because they can't focus on their relationship, and their business becomes sort of like their mistress. They start focusing on that business and they lose their relationship. I'm no exception. It happened to me. I ended up losing my relationship and having to go through a pretty contested divorce. Now, here's the big problem. You cannot put your divorce on the back burner, right? You have deadlines, you have court dates, you have lawyers, you have demands that you have to meet, unless you're going to throw everything away, right? And I wasn't willing to do that. So I had to focus on the divorce. Well, when you focus on a divorce, you can't focus on your business. So while I was focusing on the divorce, I'd have customers who didn't get taken care of. I'd have employees who would quit. A lot of people jumped ship during that time. They thought that I was going under because of the divorce, and I wasn't able to clarify it, and I didn't have enough capacity to come and run the business and run the systems. And because we had no systems when I was gone, nobody really knew what to do. So they all ran around, like they were on fire. Customers got angry. I started getting bad reviews. Started getting panned pretty bad for not being able to keep my promises to customers. Luckily, we had insurance and we had lawyers, and we were able to navigate some of that stuff. And then we started getting fined by L&I, and I couldn't keep up with it. I couldn't fight it, and so I let it all go. That second year, we ran the business from a $5 million revenue business with well over a dozen and a half, almost 24 employees, to a $0 business and an asset sale. Right? I didn't know at the time that it was a lack of processes, a lack of systems, a lack of leadership. And because of those things, I spent some time being angry, sour, and blaming everybody else. I blamed my employees. I said, why didn't they just stick in? Why couldn't they make it? Why did they jump ship on me? Right? If only they would have stayed, we would have made it through this storm, and things would have been good on the other side. I blamed my partner, who stayed with me through this divorce. And I told her, I said, this is your fault because I'm spending time with you. I shouldn't have had a relationship. And it's your fault that I lost my business. I blamed my financial associate. I said, it's their fault. The only person I didn't blame at the time was myself, because I said, I'm a hard worker. Because I realized I was doing so much, but one person only has so much capacity, right? And I don't care who you are, you cannot run a $5 million business by yourself with no systems, where you are every department lead and every head, and you have to go through the business and make sure every single small thing is in check. Because prior to the divorce, I would walk into the office. I would power walk to the back, and I'd talk to Leanne, who is our basically our CFO. And I would say, Leanne, what's the numbers today? What do we have to make? What do we have to do? She would say, Brandon, these are the numbers. This is what we have to do. And here's what the payroll is. And here's what I'm afraid of today. And I'd say, don't worry, Leanne, I got this. And I'd go out and I'd tell the techs, I'd say, you have to sell this and this and this and this. Then I'd go out and I'd say, Leanne, tell Nautica, who was our CSR at the time, tell Nautica to schedule me for 3 or 4 sales calls. I'm going to go pick up this money so we can make payroll. At the same time, my comfort advisors were not being able to get those opportunities, but I didn't have time to train them to be able to close like I close. And so I went out there and I did them for them. And so they didn't make a lot of money, and they got their opportunities taken from them often. Then I'd take the afternoon to go to all the installs, check on them, check for the quality. Sometimes I'd end up working alongside the installers to help them finish a job because, of course, they weren't trained well. And then I'd go to the service team and I'd say what needs to be cleaned up. I'd start taking refrigeration calls, and by 11 o'clock, if I was lucky, I'd get to go home and sleep so that I could wake up at 4 a.m. and do it all over again. And I did that day in and day out and day in and day out until I had to focus on my divorce. That was the only way the company made any money. That was the only way the company lived to tell the tale the next day. This is where I had to learn a very valuable lesson, which is that you need to find your talent. You need to find what you're good at. You need to know what you're not good at. You need to focus on what you're good at. You need to delegate what you're not good at. And you need to do it to people who can actually do the things you can't do. Don't just give the job to people that are people you know, or a service technician that's just been working for you for a while, but he really wants to be a service manager, but he's got no service management experience. He's never been a manager. Now you're going to put him in charge of 5 other guys. That's when I learned the hard way. So the second year, I drove the business into the ground, and in 2017, I sold the assets of the business. At the time, we had a 7,000, 8,000 square foot shop. We had a sheet metal shop in there. We had a bunch of service parts in stock. We had a bunch of vans. We had all kinds of things. I sold all of that one by one by one. In fact, most of the contractors that I sold it to, it's kind of embarrassing because they were construction. I sold the sheet metal shop to a guy who owned Big Tuna Construction in Long Beach, and he was a good friend of mine, and his business and my business were both growing. So it was kind of embarrassing. It was like the walk of shame among my contractor friends, right? Here I am closing up, going through a divorce. People have jumped ship on me. I've hurt or harmed my reputation in the town by not being able to focus on customers. And now I'm selling my equipment for pennies on the dollar so that I can make enough money to keep paying these lawyers. So that's a quick story about my business, the rise and fall. The core lessons are, look, if you're going to start a business, the best way you can grow is to try to start finding businesses that are already going out of business or throwing in the towel. Get their customer lists. See if you can't monetize that. Advertise to them, direct mail them. Let them know the company's switching over and that you're the new company that they've named to take over the contracts. Once you get that far, cool. The way you keep it is by putting together processes and systems that help run the company. So standard operating procedures on your technicians, how they perform their job, what they do each time in and time out. Get a CRM. It doesn't have to be Service Titan at the beginning. It could be something smaller like House Call Pro. I used Field Edge for a while. There was one I used before that. Maybe it was Jobber. One of these others that are like $49 a month. Very cheap, but it's better than paper and pen. And become a COD company at the very beginning. Do not extend credit to everybody just because you're a new company and you feel you have to. Okay, become a COD company. If you're staying in residential, I would say stay a COD company. If you're going into commercial, COD for the first job, maybe the first few, maybe you need to establish a relationship. But I find that if you actually just talk to the companies, they'll make exceptions for you And generally, they can always make that exception. We worked with a bunch of facility management, energy management companies like Roth Brothers and All American Facilities, Engineering Excellence, and a few others that gave us a bunch of routine commercial work. We set with them in our contracts a not to exceed number for all of our maintenance work. So when we did maintenance with these groups, we had an NTE of $1,000. So that means we could take care of small repairs, and we knew that if we were sending our technician out, we could at least bill something more than the maintenance. If he ran into a problem where a contactor or capacitor needed replaced, then we had automatic approval. We didn't have to make 2 trips to do that job. So really negotiate with those people if you get into those types of contracts. Residential, COD, SOPs, get a CRM, put the SOPs in a little binder, put them in place for your technician to read, and then more training, more leadership through training, which is going out when you're with your field staff or your technicians in the morning, do some fun exercises. Teach them through game and through activity and through reward and prize, and make sure to celebrate the small wins. These are things I didn't do in my first company, and so when I did run into a little static, a little bit of time where I couldn't take care of the company and take care of my divorce at the same time, it was easy for them to jump ship because there was nothing that was really holding them there. There's no culture that was built. There was no retention that was built through these processes of good leadership. They were workhorses like me. So they just found a new job because that's all they knew, right? There was nothing keeping them. So focus on those things. One thing I would recommend is read the book Good to Great. Another great book to read is The 1 Minute Manager. If you read those books, I imagine you'll have a much better time managing your brand new service company. If you read those books and apply the things. The other one is the E-Myth by Michael Gerber. Now, these are books I didn't read. And in fact, my partner gave the books to me and I let them sit on a bookshelf. Right? So also read the books and apply them, and don't just have them sitting there for decoration on your bookshelf. Because if you do that, then all that beautiful information that's inside of them, you'll pay for one way or the other. I think that's really all I have today. I just really wanted to get this story out. I was 23 years old. I don't beat myself up about it. I've had some HVAC people in the community beat me up about it, but when they realized I was 23 years old, I don't know how they feel, but people have failures in life, right? And that was a failure that taught me a lot of stuff, and I was going through some really personal things at the time, and really, honestly, business isn't everything. That's the last lesson, honestly. Business isn't everything, guys. Focus on your family and on your personal life. Focus on your health, your fitness, right? Your happiness. Because it sure does suck running a business when you still come home and you're not happy because you've got a bad personal life. Okay? So make sure you focus on those things. Would I do things differently now? Of course. Of course I would. There's a lot of things I would change. But we can't go back, and we can't reinvent that company, and it's dead. It's gone. What I do know is that I've had some time to play in a big giant sandbox of figuring out things that work and things that don't work since then, and it's been really fun to be that person who's able to kind of be the chameleon in the industry and go out and say, okay, today I'm going to see if a company runs well if I do this, or what if I do this? How about if I apply this principle? What about this training technique? And that's really fun, and it's something I enjoy doing. Teaching above all is something I really, really enjoy doing. So stay tuned, guys. We're going to have a lot more information. I'm going to have some guests on here next week. It's going to be a lot better. But yeah, 23 years old, rise and fall of my first service company, Stowe Mechanical, and now you know. All right, take care, guys.